Hi, this is Sweet Life and I'm Natasha, back at it with a recipe for beef bourguignon. I'm not the biggest fan of beef, and until recently, I only ate it a few times per year. I still don't eat it much more than that. But beef bourguignon is a hearty stew that hits just the right note in the dead of winter. It requires a few steps, but the work is worth it for the flavorful meat that goes well over a bed of creamy mashed potatoes.
And so here I have about 2 to 3 pounds of beef. This is like what you would buy for stew. And I've just washed it with some vinegar, and this I'm now going to dredge in just some flour. And then that is going to go into a pot with just a little bit of oil, and basically what we're doing here is just browning it. What this is going to do is it's going to give the meat a nice color, first of all. It's going to give it some flavor. So if you think of like when you make soup and things like that, you cook it first before putting it into the liquid. And so this is just the meat that's been browned. I've taken it out of the pot and set it aside. And on we go from here. Now, the meat is a little lacking in color. It's a little lighter in color than I prefer. I like my meat to have like a nice, rich brown color to it. And so I've just added a little bit of browning, or you can add caramel color or something like that, just to give it a little bit of color. I find like the visual makes it even more enjoyable. And so now I just have the beef in the pot and I'm just stirring it. Going ahead, we're going to pretty much cook it most of the way, but really the aim here is to brown the outside of it to get some flavor going. And to this I now add some onion, and this is just like a medium to a large size regular yellow onion, nothing special. A bit of garlic. The amount is completely up to you. I like garlic, so I'll do a few teaspoons. It's up to you. You can do a tablespoon. You can certainly do less. And again, every time I add something in, you want the flavor to be even, so you go ahead and just give the pot a stir. Each time I add something to the pot, I give it a few stirs just to try to distribute the flavor and the ingredients. To this now, I'm adding just 3 cups of wine. Nothing too crazy. This is just, really it's a cheap red wine that I bought from the store. But again, like cooking with wine, you want to use good ingredients. It doesn't have to be incredibly expensive, but it should be a wine that you enjoy, that you would like to drink on its own. I think like that's a good rule stick. I'm not like a wine aficionado or anything like that. I don't really drink, and I don't drink wine like that. But you can go to the store, get something recommended, go with something that you already like. And again, just stirring the pot. And in this case, as the beef is continuing to cook, we've now added the onions and all this kind of stuff. You might find that it sticks a little bit to the bottom of the pot. No worries. Go ahead, take the spoon and just gently scrape the bottom of the pot. All of that flavor is just going to contribute to the dish. It's just going to help with the flavor. So here I have a roasting pan. You can certainly use a foil pan, but the thing is that whatever vessel you use, it needs to have some depth to it. And at the bottom of this, I'm just adding some sliced button mushrooms, some sliced carrots. You don't want them too thick. You don't want them too thin. The carrots, because I like them to be cooked through, but not mushy. They're a little bit thicker than the mushroom. The mushroom is really just going to act like a sponge and absorb all of the flavor. So with that, I've sliced that fairly thin. And again, just layering this up, mixing the carrots and the mushrooms together, layering it up, sort of creating a bed for the beef and the other ingredients that I'm now going to add to bring the beef bourguignon together. So veggies are in the bottom of the pot, and I'm just going to go ahead and add some pearl onions. And these are frozen. Very easy to obtain, straight into the pot. It adds like a nice little touch. It's traditional and I think a good feature. We have onion already, but this is just like kicking it up a bit. And here I have the beef that I cooked earlier, which has just some aromatics, so the onion, the garlic. I previously added just a cup of wine, and that was really just to help deglaze the bottom of the pan. This is now the remaining 2 cups of wine for a total of 3 cups of wine. And again, adding liquid to the pot and just stirring, gently scraping the bottom of the pot. It's allowing me to release some of those bits from the bottom of the pot and just helping to build on the flavor of the meat, of the stew at this point. And so just continuing to let this cook, very gently stirring. You don't really want to break up the beef too much. And to add more flavor, I've just added a bit of stock. And this is just a few cups. I'm using some reduced sodium beef broth, but you can certainly use beef stock if you could get it. If you can't get stock, you can certainly use either veggie stock or chicken. And again, continuing to just constantly stir the pot. This is just to help ensure that you fully incorporate all the flavors. And now just adding the seasonings. So a little bit of seasoning salt, and in addition to that, some black pepper. You've now let the meat cook for a bit. Adding the seasonings now. I mean, you could add it earlier on, but this kind of gives you an opportunity to see what you might need versus what you might want to pull back on a little bit. Adding it at this point, because we're going to put it into the oven for a bit, it's still going to get an opportunity to absorb all of the flavors, to absorb the seasoning. So far I've just put a little bit of salt and some black pepper. I'm continuing to stir it, also just to help avoid having too much of the liquid stick to the bottom of the pot. So continuing on from there, I'm just adding some herbs. So in this case, some thyme, some oregano, some basil. I'm using dried herbs. You can certainly use fresh if you'd prefer. I like to use dry herbs because it's easier to keep it on hand. And from there, just a sprinkling of some different spices. I already have the salt and black pepper in there, but I'm just going to add a little bit of allspice, and that's really just about it. It's really not anything too complicated. And like I said, probably for the millionth time, each time I add an ingredient, I just go ahead and I give the pot a stir. Because it's thickening up quite a bit, I've just added a little bit of water. So now to the roasting pan with our vegetables, I'm going to go ahead and just pour in the beef mixture with its gravy. And as you're doing this, just be very careful. The liquid is quite hot. Well, the beef as well. So just be really careful as you're pouring it over. You're now bringing pretty much your meat and your vegetables together. Again, you want to give it a stir. Give it a nice combination, get all of that mixed in together, and then we're going to put it into the oven. So nothing really complex. All I'm doing is just, kind of smoothing out the beef, kind of trying to ensure that I get some of that liquid, some of that gravy on everything. Mind that this isn't a fancy cut of beef that I'm using here. But what I'm doing is cooking it in 2 parts. First, I browned it up on the stove. I got like a nice thick, rich gravy. I've put it into this roasting pan, and along with the other vegetables, it's going to go into the oven where it's going to cook at a low and slow temperature. That meat is just going to become incredibly tender. It's going to give a lot of flavor to the vegetables. The carrots, the mushrooms, the onions are just going to soak all of that flavor up. And as well, because we have this combination of spices, of herbs, of having the meat browned, just building layers as we went along. At the end of this, we're going to end up with a very, very flavorful stew. So again, roasting pan, after stirring the ingredients together, the meat and the vegetables that is, you're going to just give it a cover and put it into the oven. You don't want it at like a blazing high heat. Typically, when I'm cooking most things, unless there's a reason to go higher, I'm typically in the range of maybe a 350 to 400. And so you just put it in, let it continue cooking until the meat is fully cooked through, very tender. The vegetables as well should be pretty tender. So beef bourguignon for me is one of those nice, rich dishes that's great for winter. Like, when you get them from February into March, right around now. And basically, it goes with any kind of starch that you could think of. You can certainly serve it on a bed of creamy mashed potatoes, but rice is just as good, as is pasta. But in the case of pasta, because it's such a chunky stew, I would recommend going with something a bit more substantial than like a spaghetti, right? You might want to go with something more along the lines of like, say, egg noodles, and it's deceptively complex, but actually quite easy to make. It has like some really nice, rich flavors that hit just the right spot. It's a nice hearty meal, especially depending on what you pair it with, what you serve it with. And I think you really can't go wrong. You can also add potatoes or other vegetables. Go ahead and put your spin on it. Thanks for tuning in. To ensure you don't miss any episodes, subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell, go ahead and click that thumbs up button if you like what you saw, and go ahead and share it on social media.